Hello, everyone. What's up? All right. Thursday at noon, best hour of my week. Great to be back with you. Been off for a few weeks, and I've definitely missed this group and this conversation. I hope you enjoyed some of you some teaching from Rabbi Ronit Tzadok and also from Dr. Jody Myers a couple of weeks ago, and then last week I couldn't find a third person who was available, and I was really tempted to just teach it, but I knew I would like lose the last week of my vacation. I would just think about this. So I've enjoyed my time off, but I'm excited to be back, and I hope you are as well. And it's as I enter back into work, as we enter back into this space, we're entering into a new month, into the month of Elul. The month of Elul is a month of intimacy with God, or a month of spiritual preparation for the encounter of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. A month of getting ready for doing the work. Right? Lots of different ways to phrase it, but Elul is a whole month that our tradition sets aside for us to get ready for something. To go deep inside of ourselves, to explore the most powerful relationships in our lives. So that's all around us right now, if we're living in Jewish time. And so when we study the Parsha, which is one of the primary ways that we live in Jewish time, every week we're all in we're all right. The week is like this Jewish concept. And we're all in this thing together. We're in this story together. That's what the Parsha is. It's a shared story that we're living together. And so living this story in the midst of Elul means that when we turn to the Torah, we're thinking about what we're working on spiritually. So with these this is our regular Parsha class, but for these next 4 weeks, for the sessions that we will be together in the month of Elul for, we're gonna try to look at our Torah together through a particular lens, what Barry Holtz from JTS calls a moralistic orientation. In other words, we're going to ask, what does the Torah have to teach me, you, me, us? What moral message am I hearing here? And can I be shaped by it? I want us to ask that a little bit more than we usually do. We modern people are like, whoa, 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 don't tell me what to do. And maybe our answer will be, actually, I need to adjust that message because we're still Israel, right? We still push back. But we're going to look at our Torah in that way, okay? This month, and so today we're going to look at a very important and well-known law in the book of Deuteronomy, and we're going to be kind of exploring the origins and the meaning of this law, and we'll also ask for what does it mean for us? Okay, but don't worry, I also got some mind-bending Torah in store for you. So let's get started today. We'll start with a blessing sanctifying this experience we're having together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, let's get started. Here we go. So I'm going to give you a source sheet, and what we're going to do is we're right now this week we're at Parshat Choftim, and we're gonna kind of go right into it. Okay, we're gonna get right into the opening, the great opening of Parshat Choftim. Here's a source sheet for you, and as usual, I'll just be sharing it. And it's a very famous opening. It's a very famous moment in the Torah. This is the opening lines of Parshat Choftim, and it's grand. Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha lishvatecha v'shaftu et ha'am mishpat tzedek. Judges and officers you shall place in all your gates, that the eternal your God is giving you. And they shall judge the people with just laws. You shall not bend justice You shall show no favor. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the wise and twist the words of the righteous. And then this is the famous line, right? Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, lamant chiyeh, v'yirashta et haaretz, asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach. Justice, justice shall you pursue. They say that Justice Ginsburg had this up in her office, right? Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may live and inherit the land that the eternal your God is giving you. This is the line, right? Woo, that's how you inscribe that one on the wall. It's a beautiful opening, this little triplet here, these three verses. But I want to focus on the middle verse, the one that actually is less poetic and sometimes gets less of our attention, because the truth is, it's very beautiful. Judges and officers shall you place in your gates, and justice, justice shall you pursue. Dun, 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 dun. And it is indeed, okay, let's just stop for a minute and say, this is a big moment. It's a big moment. Where are we in the Torah? We're in the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy, remember, is Moses' great speech to the people. These are my last words. And some of it is recounting the journey. And then Moses shifts a couple weeks ago and starts giving new laws. Giving new laws, presumably that he's like getting from God, but it's a little hard to say. Moshe's got this whole new, the most important thing to keep in mind in the book of Deuteronomy is that Moshe is talking. This is Moses' voice. Okay, so Moshe gives laws for a while and then starts in this Parsha mapping out a whole justice system. And that's the first time we saw laws that would take care of individual disputes, kind of like a smaller desert society back in the book of Exodus. But now we're beginning to imagine what it'll be like to live in the land of Israel, which is what Moses is preparing them for. So it is a big deal that you have judges, and it does matter that these are not small things. And justice, the whole justice as the central principle of this society, great. But these verses of kind of rhetorical flourish really end up framing in biblical literature this central verse. And there's one concern that the central verse seems to have. Lo sate mishpat velo takir panim velo tikach shochad ki ha-shochad ya'aver einei chachamim v'salef divrei tzadikim. You shall not bend justice. Shall not bend justice. You shall show no favor. Lo takir panim, literally, you shall not recognize faces. Like, oh, that's my buddy. Shall not recognize faces. Do not take bribes. Lo tikach shochad. That's the word here. It's in Hebrew right here. Shochad. That's going to be our word for today. Do not take bribes. And then it repeats it in the very economical language of the Torah. Nevertheless, there's a repetition here. Ki ha-shochad, because that thing I just mentioned, shochad, ye'aver einei chachamim. It blinds the eyes of the wise. V'salef divrei tzadikim. Now that's quite a phrase. Quite a phrase. Don't take bribes. Okay, and we're going to talk about that. Because bribes blind the eyes of the wise and twist the words of the righteous. Now, let's just start. We're going to end up thinking about the particular expression in that phrase, but let's just start by asking, what is the concern here, right? Like here we are talking about judges. Seems like the big, one of the most important roles in this society. There's an entire book that will be called Judges. Like judges are the leaders in this world. Okay, what do they do? What's the most important thing I need you to know about judges? First thing I want to tell you, they judge well, and that means don't take bribes. So let's begin there. Why such a worry? Why is this the thing? Don't take bribes. Why is this such a worry? And another way of asking the question is, what are we assuming here about the way that human beings work? At least in the social world, right? Like, what are we starting to say? what is Moses here saying about the way people are, that he wants to tell you, like, don't take bribes, you judges. Okay. Leah, nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. I mean, first of all, I always think that if they're making a rule, there must be a reason for this rule. They need to make the rules that have already been happening. But secondly, what you were asking about is like, I think the idea that people are greedy and like money can be more important than things being fair, even with judges, that they're human beings, and they could possibly be people who are not always like able to control their own urges.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, first of all, people are greedy, right? Avarice. What is it? Like, I think it's the Catholics who have 7 deadly sins, and avarice is one of them. That is to say, spiritual traditions know that this is one of the, if you start talking spiritual traditions, philosophical traditions, Platonic traditions, vice and virtue, greed is one of those things, and it's out there, and watch for it. And you might think that, you just get a wise person in there and don't worry about it. No. Everybody is vulnerable to this, right? Presumably the chachamim, the wise people, those aren't chumps. Those are like the best people you got, and still don't think for a minute that they're immune to this force. I have to say, I know that greed is a force that literally runs our society. That's like our economic system, right? That like presumes it. So I'm not surprised by the appearance of greed, but wow, that's my first thought in judging. That's quite a statement. All right, so let's keep going. Kate, I see Kate in her car. Hi.
Hi. Fortunately, Matt's driving.
Right on. Okay, yeah, good combo.
We're in the Shenandoah Valley at the moment.
Wonderful.
I think one of the things it's saying is, that there's skepticism that people are good at this point.
Yeah, good. Okay, now I'm not hearing you, Kate, but I think that I'm sure I'm missing some gold here, but I think that you are saying something important, which is that this moment that Moses is in, this is a moment of difficulty. That Moses is leaving the people, but leaving a people that he's really not sure about. And he keeps repeating, for example, I think this was last week's Parsha, the phrase like, we're not going to do what we do now, where everybody does hayashar beinav, what's right in their own eyes. That's not the way we're going to live anymore. We're going to start living right here. So that tone is like, I don't know that you're ready for justice. Do you understand what it means? You can't just like take oh, that's your buddy, you have to protect him. And let's be clear, there is a certain ethical framework through which you could justify showing favor, and that is the framework of loyalty. That's an ethical paradigm. Right? The idea of equality under the law is a departure from another ethical, which is like my tribe. If I see an Israelite and a non-Israelite in front of me, are you kidding me? Israelite every day, right? But that would be one way of approaching, and then you just get closer and closer. My cousin and just some random woman in front of me, forget about it. I'm taking my cousin every time. I'm related to her, So okay, so this is a worry that Moses has. All right, let's take a couple more thoughts. I see a lot of hands are already. Let's take a couple more thoughts, and then we'll start doing some of the work of making textual connections. Joe Schwartz.
Hi, yes. I think another big thing in this is, like it says, you shall not bend justice, is bribes causes justice to get bent by favoring the wealthy, people with money who can afford to bribe lots of money to judges. Right. And that subverts the whole idea of justice being for the vulnerable and the weak and the poor. Right.
In other words, the bribes it's not just, Joe is right to insist that we're not just talking about a trading of favor system. That is being prohibited, but it's a deeper concern, because bribes in particular are coming from those with means. And that system, so it's a worry about the way that businesses can influence politics. It's something we can't imagine in our day and age, but back then they were worried the business, would influence politics in ways that favored the wealthy. Can you believe it? Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. Okay, let's take a couple more. Kathy.
Yeah, I was going to say, what I'm really struck with is that it seems like the worry is really focused on the good people. That Moses or God or whoever it is worried about the wise and the righteous. I mean, you were sort of talking about this earlier, but I just wanted to emphasize it because it's that these bribes may blind the eyes of the wise. It's not like, oh, I'm worried that the bad people are going to be terrible and go out there and do these terrible things. I'm afraid that the wise and the righteous people are going to be do something wrong, so that it seems like it has to do more with self-deception, rather than a deliberate maliciousness. Now, obviously, that's wrong too, to take bribes for stupid, greedy people to take bribes too. But the worry seems to be here really about the good people.
Okay, very perceptive as always, Kathy, and it's a perfect comment for right now, because I want to use Kathy's comment to show us one more text that really emphasizes what Kathy's pointing out, and then also to put our eyes on, right, just to be meta about it, to put our eyes on this notion of blindness. So what I want to just show you, remember, Kathy is pointing out that the emphasis here is on the wise and the potential for the wise to deluding themselves, thinking that they can get through. That's the problem, is that the wise among us are having this issue, not a systemic corruption, but a kind of a corruption of a self perhaps too confident of his own powers, or his own powers of reason, or powers of office. So now look at that, just to make this point very clear. This is our first move here, right? This is let's just get warmed up here. We're going to make some, I think, startling connections, but first we have to make a really basic connection, because this is something that Moses is doing all the time. This law, it's not the first time we've seen it. This law that we just looked at, this is in Deuteronomy. Moses does this. He gives a bunch of new laws in Deuteronomy, but sometimes he just repeats old laws. Presumably, he's the same guy that gave you the laws in Exodus. But there's a difference, right? In Exodus, we were also presuming, as a matter of reading, we were presuming that God gave Moses these laws. Moses said, right? Ele hamishpatim. These are the laws that God gave. Now it's like Moses is almost like expanding, elaborating, reflecting upon, sometimes changing a little bit or adding a little bit. So there's a certain kind of device that we have to pay attention to here, where Moses repeats things that we've seen in the book of Exodus. Let's take a look for a minute at the phrasing in the book of Exodus, which is not nearly identical, but not exactly identical. Lo sateh mishpat. Again, don't bend. I should translate it the same way. Don't bend the rights or the laws of the needy. I'm going to say the justice of the needy in their disputes. Let's say laws. The word is mishpat, and it's always a little hard whether to translate it as law or justice. Okay, so take care of the poor. This was Joe's concern, by the way. Ding, 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 ding. Joe Schwartz. Keep far from a false charge. Midvar sheker tirchak. Stay away from falsehood. Vinaki tzadik al ta'arog ki lo atzdik rasha. Don't bring death on the innocent, because I will not justify the wicked. Justify the wicked. That's really what it, I don't know why. I'm sorry, I didn't translate this. I will not justify the wicked. It's better for us to translate it this way. We'll be in better position later on. So, and I will translate this also as right, as in the right, who are right. Because I want you to see who are just. How about that? I want you to see that there's a connection between the just here, the tzaddik, and you justifying, atzdik. Lo atzdik rasha. Okay, again, that language will be more useful to us later. This is the language I want us to pay attention to right now. Shochad lo tikach, ki shochad ya'aver pikchim v'yisalef divrei tzadikim. And in the English, do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted and twist the words of the righteous. Same kind of language, or blinding. Bribes blind. That's what bribes do. They blind. But there's something different, right? Following Kathy's comment, what's different? Now it's just that bribes blind everybody. Anyone who can see, bribes blind them. Pikchim, this is just a word that literally means sighted. Bribes blind the sighted. And in Deuteronomy, it's bribes blind the eyes of the wise. Okay, so that's quite a new specificity, and it's an emphasis. I mean, it makes me now want to ask the question: so what's all this blindness stuff? Like, what is the Torah saying? I mean, I guess it's obvious, right? Like, blind. If you are bribed, you stop seeing the truth. Isn't that? That's not true, though, isn't it? You just ignore it because you're being paid to ignore it, right? I mean, what's the language or the obsession here with blinding? So I want to throw that question out as well. I want to turn to some hands that have been up from before. So I'll come back to the question of blindness if you have something else to offer, but that's where we're headed. Leah Matsui.
Okay, Moses, Prince of Egypt, was able to see a structure in pharaonic Egypt. Money talked. You're buried with golden sandals. Huge monumental structures. None of that was free. So now he's offering a new paradigm. I mean, aren't we told right in the beginning that God created everything, the world, everything in 6 days, and it seemed to have equal value to Hashem? I mean, we're less interested in grasshoppers than we are in other human beings, perhaps, but for the Creator, it's all good. It's all of value. So perhaps Moses is saying, you guys, as you enter the new land, have to take on a new paradigm. You want to be closer to Hashem, so you have to follow his method. I'm not really saying it very
No,
well,
you're saying something extremely important, which is, again, that we have to keep in mind the larger economic and theological system that Moses is putting forth. Because for Moses, it isn't just politics, it's theocracy. And I hate to say it, but it is. I mean, because that word has a negative charge now, but it's all about God here. And theocracy is a good thing in the Torah's estimation, because the alternative is Pharaoh, is personocracy. And so, and I think Leah's exactly right. In that world, gold spoke. That's what Pharaoh did from the start, sort of with Joseph's help, but that's a different story. But Pharaoh's amassing wealth. And by being wealthy, Pharaoh is God. And one of the great messages of the Torah is, no, you don't own anything. Nobody owns anything. I want to say that again and again and again. Property is a myth. It is a myth. And it is a myth that is useful for us so that we can organize a society where people get to use the things they want. But according to the Torah, God owns everything. God owns everything. So there's a certain theological framework being offered here. And yet, we're people. And anytime you have people involved, I want some money. I want some stuff. Help, Okay, so now let's just, I wanted, before we get too carried away here, we could talk about bribery forever. And I hope you're feeling like, oh, that has a meaning for me. Am I greedy? Do I like people to do things for me? Do I take too much? In what way do I show favor? Preference people. Okay, so some of those questions in mind, but as we continue to do this through the text, let's ask about the language of the text. What's up with the blindness? Why that metaphor? Why is it so important to the Torah that bribes blind you? What is that saying about the function of bribes? So let me keep circling around here. I saw Wayne has a hand up. Hi, Wayne.
Thanks. When I read blinding the eye, I think more of obscuring the mind. It affects judgment, because at the end of the day, not everything was having to be seen with your eyes, and rendering judgment by someone whose mind is obscured will not render good judgment.
Incredibly important point. Incredibly important point. That and I think very precise reading of the language here. The reason that blindness is the language here, says Wayne, at least one of the reasons, is that we're not just talking about someone who says, well, I really shouldn't do this, but if you give me $500, I'll give you a fair, I'll give you the, not fair, I'll give you the ruling you want. That's not really what we're talking about, says Wayne. We're talking about something much deeper, which is that you take me out to dinner, and I like, or I take the $500, but I somehow, by taking the $500, what I say to myself is, you know, I mean, this guy deserves it anyway. I'm just doing the right thing here. I begin to lose sight of what's actually true. That's the problem here. Bribes distort my consciousness. It is a metaphor, isn't it? They don't make you blind. It's a metaphor. They distort your ability to perceive. When people show you, and it doesn't have to be goods, does it? When people show you flattery, oh my gosh, I live in Los Angeles, California. There is so much of that here. Everybody just kissing each other's butts all over this town. That's like the language of Los Angeles. And like, you know, I mean, I'm a rabbi. You know what I mean? Like, people are so nice. Oh, rabbi, you're so what? You know, start to be like, all right, cool. Like it has an effect on you. So watch that. Watch that. Be careful. Okay. All right. Let's take again a few more comments here, and then we're going to push forward a little bit into. I want to spend at least the last half of our class looking at quite a twist. Okay, but let's hear from some folks. David Kurtz.
I love that this follows Ra'eh, last week's Parsha portion. You know, God makes you see things. Getting to the with Moses, everything was behold. Everything was in the Pharaonic, as we were talking about. It was like, look at, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. But the main thing I wanted to say is, I think you can't help but avoid the story of Isaac. I mean, which is a really tough thing for all of us, because we are founded on the principle of bribery and blindness. So that's what resonates for me.
David, how did you do that? Did you just cheat? Did you look ahead? Because that's like, I'm like feeling such a surge of joy right now in my heart. That's I can't believe you just said that. I mean, I like the brilliance of that connection is exactly where we're headed.
But it's obvious, isn't it? I mean, that story is so huge. I did not look ahead.
I love that. I love that that's true for you, because it wasn't obvious to me. It took me.
I have one quick question. How do you think, I mean, I know we're oral history, but how do you think Moses knew the stories of Genesis?
Okay. Okay, I'm so excited. All right, you just cracked this whole thing wide open. Let's give David Kurtz a round of applause. This is so beautiful. This is exactly where we're headed. It's going to like take some time to get there. Can you even believe there's a Midrash? There's a Midrash that I was going to use to take us there. And now I'm just going to read it quickly. We're going to have to analyze it to show what a brilliant connection the Midrash made, but David Kurtz just made the same connection. Okay, so we'll take 2 sentences of a running start here. So brilliant, thank you. Okay, 2 sentences of a running start. One is, 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 2 sentences of a running start. One we just saw that Moses referred back to a law that Moses had already given. Okay, so we know that Moses does that with law. That's a thing. Laws get repeated in Deuteronomy. Laws seem to be conscious of the law giving in Deuteronomy is conscious of the laws in Exodus, in Leviticus, in Numbers, right? So that's a device the Torah is already doing explicitly. Now, the question is, can we do the same thing with stories? Well, of course, Moses also refers back to the stories of Exodus. Moses has a consciousness of those things. Now, what David asked at the end there is actually an interesting question. We're going to just leave it floating. Is Moses also aware of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? The answer is yes, on some level, because God speaks of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to Moses. And we assume that this is the inherited story of the Israelites, right? That's the connection between Genesis and Exodus. Okay. So okay, with that in mind, and I must say, I want to just emphasize that because that's like, if you've studied with us together in this class, it's one of my foundational assumptions is that the Torah works in this way. The connections are not just random, but that actually the later portions of the Torah are referring back, echoing on purpose. Okay, so David just heard an echo, and it's an incredible one, but it's not the straightforward, oh, we saw that law before in the book of Exodus. There's a little bit more of a kind of thematic, there's a more vague thematic connection. And we're going to use, David's already kind of made it for us, but we're going to use a Midrash to get there. Midrash is kind of like the rabbinic commentary. The guys who wrote the Talmud, this is their commentaries on the Torah. And here is a piece from the Yalkut Shimoni. Okay, that's like a particular Midrash, rather late Midrash. Okay. Now, it begins with what's called the bolded part here is the Dibur Matchil, the opening words that it's going to comment on. When Isaac had grown old and his eyes had dimmed. Now, you already looking at this Midrash, and we would have spent more time fleshing this out, but as I said, David gave us a shortcut. But this Midrash, you already looking at it would say, wait, that's interesting. What's the focus here is on Isaac's blindness. Okay, Rabbi Yitzchak opened with this verse. By the way, just note that this is often the case. It's Rabbi Isaac, right? It's often the case, and I don't know how to account for it, whether they're just making up names or whether they always like to teach on their own forebears, but Rabbi Isaac talked about Isaac. Okay, so Rabbi Isaac opened with this verse. And it's not the verse from the Torah, it's a verse from Isaiah, but Isaiah's giving the same sentiment. Those who justify the wicked. We saw that word before, matzdikei rasha, because of a bribe, ekev shochad, and withhold vindication from the righteous. These are bad people. So there's that bribe language again. The language is shochad. That is, says Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Isaac, someone who takes a bribe in order to justify the wicked. You take a bribe and then you say that someone who is bad is good. That's what this concept is about. Take a bribe and then someone who's wicked, you say they're good. You justify their behavior. This is Isaac. That is not something that you say lightly in this tradition. Someone who took a bribe to justify the wicked, that is our forefather Isaac. This is Isaac whose eyes dimmed because he justified the wicked. He went blind because he justified the wicked. And thus it says, when Isaac had grown old and his eyes had dimmed. Now, that's quite a thing to say about Isaac, but it's also quite a connection to make. And let's just speak it out a little bit more, what David is saying, and that we're just gonna let's map out the pieces before we look at it inside. The rest of our work together will be trying to figure out how to apply this law, this concept, to the story of Isaac. And Isaac taking a bribe. Now, how did Isaac take a bribe? Can someone just this is like just the lifting for us? Can someone just speak out? Maybe David or someone else. Will someone be willing to just, what is the bribe that Isaac took? He didn't take a bribe. Nice guy. What bribe? Robert Niederman?
Well, actually, we don't know all the bribes he took, but he set the whole thing up with Esau when he told Esau, go out and get me some meat because I love meat. And if you bring it back, I'm going to give you a blessing. And my sense was, well, he's probably been doing this with Esau all of his life. So it's probably not only one bribe, but a whole lifetime of bribes that he's been taking. And that's why he favors Esau.
Ah, great. That's like, you just did that so well, Robert. Really just sort of made succinct all the connections that we needed. We'll look at that now a little bit inside exactly what Robert said, which is that we have a scene in which we see Isaac asking for favors in order to give a blessing. You give me some nice food and I'll give you a blessing. And Robert makes the sort of intuitive assumption, good assumption, this must be the way that Isaac was as a father. This is probably the way he just, come on, show me love, show me favor, do things for me, and then I will bestow my blessing upon you. And that's why the scene that we're going to look at opens with the line, and Isaac had grown old and his eyes had dimmed. Okay, so if you'll pardon me, I think we're going to read through, maybe not all of it, but most of this beautiful chapter in Parshat Toldot, Genesis 27, and to take a look at the story, just so we have the pieces in front of us to think in a deeper way about how it is that one of our own rabbis can say that Isaac violated this principle. Our forefather Isaac, from whom we come, violated the principle of not taking bribes. Okay? So let's take a look here. All right, here's the story. When Isaac had grown old and his eyes had dimmed from seeing. Okay, that's the first line. That's interesting. Blindness is actually the opening here. And now we see that it's an opening because it is a thematic cue. Okay, it's not, now that we have like a little bit of a sense of how blindness will be used by this literature, it's not just that he is blind, he's old, but he's losing some other kind of perception. Anyway, so here's what Robert was talking about. So he called his older son. As soon as we read that he can't see very well, he's losing that perception, we read that he called his older son Esav, and said to him, my son. And Esav answered, Hineni. And he said, I'm old now and I don't know how soon I may die. Take your gear, your quiver, and your bow and go out into the open and hunt me some game. Isaac liked Esau because Esau was a hunter. That's what it says. Sa'id b'piv, because he could find good food. Right? He was a foodie. Then prepare a dish for me such as I like. Bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my innermost blessing before I die. Bring me something that I love but avur, so that I can bless you from inside of me before I die. Now that's interesting, right? That's what Robert was saying, is like, there's some kind of, okay, so he's taking something in order to give something. There's a kind of an exchange there. And so Isaac is taking a bribe. And I guess Esau is the Rasha, is the wicked one. And he's going to get ready to justify his behavior by blessing it. But not so fast. And some of you know, Esau is not necessarily an unsympathetic character by the plain read of the Torah. So let's not get too quick into Esau being the wicked one here, because after all, it's a story about Jacob deceiving his father, Jacob and Rebekah. So just to finish the story, remember there's another bribe in the story, because Rebekah had been listening while Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau had gone out into the open to hunt game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau, saying, bring me some game and prepare a dish for me to eat that I may bless you with the approval of the Eternal One before I die. Now, think about what Robert Niederman said. Like, oh, Rebekah's here. Isaac always does this. He always wants little gifts, and then it's easy to manipulate him. Rebekah knows what's going on. So she's like, you know what? I got a plan. Now, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. Go to the flock and fetch me 2 choice kids, 2 little goats, and I will make of them a dish for your father, such as he likes. Then take it to your father to eat in order that he may bless you before he dies. Now, just think about what that means. They haven't even talked about the deception yet. So far, Rebecca's plan is, if you can give him a gift first, you'll get the blessing. That's that's core to this family structure. Everybody knows whoever kisses up to Papa gets the blessing. That's how it works in this family, and that's a problem. That's a problem, right? Okay. All right. So let's just finish here, and then we'll do a little analysis. So he's freaked out. And he says, "Wait a minute, though. My brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm smooth-skinned. If my father touches me, I shall appear to him as a trickster and bring upon myself a curse, not a blessing." What do you mean? Like, I can't just. What do you mean? Like, deceive him? But his mother said to him, "Your cursed son, my son, be upon me. Just do as I say and go fetch them for me." He got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared a dish such as his father liked. Rebecca then took the best clothes of her older son Esau, which were there in the house, and had her younger son Jacob put them on. I mean, I scroll back up for a sec because I caught myself like, wait, is it really true that they haven't come up with a deception plan yet? And it is. That has not been mentioned yet. The only thing that's been mentioned until Jacob raises it is just to give him the gift. Now they're going to deceive him also. And so she covered his hands and the hairless part of his neck with the skins of the goats. And then she put in the hands of her son Jacob the dish and bread that she had prepared. He went to his father and said, "Father," and he said, "Yes, which of my sons are you?" "Mi ata bni." "Who are you?" And Jacob said to his father, "I'm Esau, your firstborn, and I have done as you told me. Pray sit up and eat of my game that you may give me your innermost blessing." Isaac said to his son, "How did you succeed so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because the eternal your God granted me good fortune." And Isaac said, "Now listen to this. Listen to this. What is going on here, do you think?" And Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer that I may feel you, my son, to see whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob drew close to his father, who felt him and wondered, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, yet the hands are the hands of Esau." Now you tell me, what's going on here? Does Isaac recognize what's happening here? I mean, what kind of questions are these? Are you really Esau? Yeah, I'm Esau. I'm Esau. Okay, but your voice doesn't sound like Esau. No, it's fine. And then what happens next? He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. And so he blessed him. Right? He blessed him. And just to skip to the end here, "Serve me and let me eat of my son's game, that I may give you my innermost blessing." So he served him and he ate and he brought the wine and he drank. Then his father said to him, "Now come close and kiss me, my son." And he went up to him and kissed him, and he smelled his clothes and he blessed him. And he blessed him because he got his yummy meal. He got his yummy meal. All right. So now, what just happened there? What's going on? What's going on with Isaac there? Does Isaac really not? It says he didn't recognize him. He didn't recognize him. What do you mean he didn't recognize him? But he says, you sound like Jacob. You sound like Jacob. But he's like, "No, but you're kind of hairy on the neck there. That'll work." Right? So, okay. So here's what I want to do with the rest of our time together. You tell me now, what is the connection here? What is the Midrash saying about Isaac when it says Isaac did this? Isaac took, what is the bribe that Isaac took? And what is Isaac somehow erred in judgment? What was the error in Isaac's judgment? And there are many answers to this question. So I turn it back to you. Ari Ratner?
Let me answer your question slightly differently, which is, in our entire discussion, we've been assuming the person who is blinded by taking the bribe is the person who takes the bribe. or the person whose words are twist are the person whose words takes the bribe, which I'm sure is true. But bribery, we know, is corrupting to a whole society, right? If we're in this class and some other student bribes you, I know that. And that makes me behave very differently. That makes me turn away, become blinded. It twists my words, right? Like one of the things that's happening here is Jacob's words are twisted by this culture of bribery, right? He doesn't accept a bribe, but his words are twisted. And I think what the Torah is saying to some extent, it's a bit like you have that analysis between Southern Italy and Northern Italy. What goes wrong in Southern Italy becomes a kind of mafia culture. So like here, I mean, I can easily argue that Isaac is taking the bribe, from Jacob. He kind of recognizes him. But to some extent, I'm even less interested in back, because just the fact that someone is taking a bribe corrupts everyone else's behavior in a way that especially the smartest of them, whether they're taking a bribe or not, you become, in Israel, I forgot the word, but there's this worry that you're a sucker, and it becomes a culture where if you don't therefore make your own bribe, if you therefore don't cheat, you are a sucker. And that's what Jacob is trying not to be here, a sucker.
Yeah, love that, Ari, love that. What a framing there. And what an interesting way of reading the text. The shochad, it's the bribe itself. Hashochad ye'aver einei chachamim. The bribe blinds us, the eyes of the wise, and twists the words of the righteous.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Marianka, go for it.
What I'm thinking is it not only corrupts a society, it corrupts the law itself. I'm here in Canada, but I'm sure it works the same in the United States, is that right now, the law is based on previous court decisions, right? So if the court makes the wrong decision, the next decisions will be wrong too. And I think that's the warning at the beginning of what we were reading about bribing, because the law, it's God's law, but it's in the hands of humans from now on, right?
Okay.
So if you corrupt the law, if you make the decision based on a bribe, you're actually changing God's law. You're corrupting God's law.
Yes. Okay. This is an incredible moment, I think, that we've gotten to here, because we've been kind of tracing this theme of systemic corruption all along. Folks have mentioned that all along. So part of what we're talking about here with Marianka's comments and Ari before them is thinking about the way that a bribe ruins everybody. It distorts the whole interaction. It just, everything and Marianka says, and in perpetuity, because that decision gets recorded and those words are, and they're not right, they're twisted. And we record them. And we have, that's what we do in this tradition. We write our stories down, right? So thinking about that systemic corruption and the way that, as Ari was saying, bribes blind everybody in the situation. They distort Jacob is maybe the righteous one, right, in our tradition, or the smart one at least, but his words are becoming twisted as well, right? So thinking about the systemic force of greed and corruption, right? And then also thinking about the way that can be true for a state system, a justice system, and also a family system. Within a family system and think about this now, and again, we're in the month of Elul. In your family, in your friend group, in your social group, what ways are people manipulating one another? How are you participating in it? What falsehoods exist and perpetuate in order to satisfy the needs of the one on top? Right. Really, 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 really good and vexing questions here. All right, let's hear from a couple more folks. Jen Bailey, Kara, how you doing?
Hey, I'm here.
That's something.
Two really quick things. One really quick thing. I do want to question from a contemporary perspective using blindness as a metaphor for this, because that is something that affects people who are blind in our contemporary context. Like we use blindness as a metaphor for like moral turpitude, and I just want to note that as we like follow that ancient use of that metaphor. But also following on what Marianka and Ari were saying, when you
Can I
corrupt,
pause right there, because I want to give you a chance to give us a second point, but it is an important point. And yes, I think it is. First of all, it's important to just acknowledge that we can't just call blindness a bad thing, a thing that represents moral decrepitude. Since, I mean, I say this as somebody with disabled parents, like I wouldn't want deafness to become like the metaphor for like not hearing the message properly in some ways, right? I get, on the other hand, just like heeding to the language of the Torah, there's a related question here about how much this is a metaphor. That is to say, Isaac, in the metaphysics of at least the Midrash, Isaac is going blind. There's a literalism to it, meaning the Torah is actually playing with that. And it may be a metaphor we've departed from, but it's one we still want to keep in mind, because there's something that the story is doing where Isaac is actually blind, but that represents a kind of blindness of perception, with all of your caveats, absolutely, what is it, withstanding?
Yeah. And you see that way of treating disability play out in the way that the law plays out over centuries after that. Like, it has real effects on disabled people in the community. But my other comment, following on Marianka and Ari, is the fact that it corrupts the law is a parallel to it corrupting relationships between people. Like, that's what's really going on in the Isaac story, is their relationships are all broken. And when it corrupts the law, especially in the context of the Exodus and the following story of the law being given to the people, that's the primary venue in which God is trying to create a relationship with people. So the two things to me that follow from that is, first of all, that corrupting the law separates you from God. And it separates you from other people. It's a way of pushing away and making yourself alone. And it also, those parallels, the parallels that are being drawn here by the Midrash, imply that your relationship with God is echoed and reflected in your relationship with people. That those are two things that are of the same profound quality.
Thank you. Wow, there's such richness in that description that you just gave us. I mean, such profundity in the way that you spoke about that. We're starting to make that connection already between the societal and the familial personal. But what you're suggesting here is that the Torah is doing that on purpose. The Torah is premising the social relationship. Remember, we started as a family, and then we become tribe, and then we become several tribes, and then we become a nation. And also God has a relationship with us. And the God metaphor in the Torah is one of like someone who's trying to also be in our family, right? And so the law is a medium through which we are negotiating our relationships. And you are all my siblings. You are all my siblings. So I have to figure out how not to cheat you out of your blessing, right? Even if I'm the smart one and the righteous one and the one who really should be the leader and have all the skills, I shouldn't throw you under the bus, right? And use what influence and power I have to sweep you aside, because that's what breaks families apart. That's what breaks societies apart. Very, 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 very important texture that Jen is giving us there. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more comments. Yonatan.
Yeah, I want to give word to two disconnects that I'm perceiving here in connecting this story to bribery. Oh, I woke Hannah up. The first is you have to read the Genesis story out of order, right? For this to make sense, the bribery comes after the blindness, and so it doesn't quite work so much. But the other disconnect that I think is more important from a commentary perspective is the Torah doesn't use the same word in the two places. In the Exodus and Deuteronomy verses, we get iver, right? We say that like the person gets blinded, but we get kaheinav, right? In kahuinav in Genesis, that like the eyes become dim. They're not quite blind, right? There's somewhere in between. And these two things make it difficult for me to think that what happened here was just Isaac accepted this bribe and he made the wrong decision. And I think the bribe, to my reading, is something different. It's that God bribed Isaac with a ram. God said, Isaac, you get to live if you just allow your father to kill this ram instead of you. And I think that created a resentment in Isaac that ultimately led him to bless the child who said, the Lord your God, right? Like, not the Lord my God. Isaac never really is into this whole God thing very much, and has the same fraught relationship with God that he has with Abraham.
Okay, all right. So first of all, okay, just at the end there, you gave us like a tease of a massive idea, because after all, favoritism is the problem that we see throughout the Torah. And the first instance of it is God choosing Abel over Cain. So God is complicit in this ongoing selection, favoring one over another. And that is, it's a problem that we have right from the very start. So there's all this tangled up theology that we still have to do. But Yonatan is also, and I want to kind of use this to end, Yonatan is also asking really important questions about the way in which we can imagine the Torah to be commenting on itself, or Moses to be using how deeply connected are these stories after all? It's clear as day that the law in Deuteronomy is picking up on the law as articulated in Exodus. That's the exact same language. But here we've got a thematic connection. And that's a really important move here that we have to consider. Yonatan says, we have to consider whether we're making it wisely. Is it fair to say that the legislator of Deuteronomy is kind of thinking about the old story of Isaac? Now, David Kurtz said yes, and so does the Midrash here say yes, but it's looser. It's not like a direct commentary. It's just pay attention to this theme, because this theme goes all the way back and exists within us. Now, I just will close with this. It's 1 o'clock, and I'll just close with this. Yonatan points out that the language of blindness is different. That the language of Iver, blind, is one of the languages that we see, and that we have in our Parsha in Deuteronomy, in the one in Exodus. But it's not the language from the Isaac story. Kahei enav, his eyes grew dim. It's a particular kind of language. Now, what is fascinating, here's a thought to spin your head on the way out, is that, remember, we're talking about Moses being the one making these connections and telling this story. So the phrase that someone's eyes grew dim occurs one other time in the Torah. Does anyone know where it is? Yonatan, you want to come in? No? I saw someone hitting their...
Oh, shoot. Is it when Jacob is dying?
No, it is when Moses is dying. It's when Moses is dying. Moses was 120 years old when he died, and his eyes were undimmed, lo kataino, and his vigor unabated. The Torah, this is the last chapter in the Torah. Last lines. In fact, there's an interesting question here, with the idea of Moses as the narrator. Did Moses recite these words? Did Moses say, and Moses died and his vision was still clear? Which would, in one way, make sense, because Moses is the one who all along has been tracking this theme and caring about it. So maybe Moses is the ultimate judge, is saying, and I never showed favor. I was never biased in my judgment, and that's one thing I want you, put it on my tombstone, right? Or other voices in the tradition say, no, Joshua had to write the last chapter of the Torah, the last lines of the Torah, because Moses can't write about his own death. In which case, what they're saying is, Moses, we honor you with the thing that you warned us about. You were a good judge. Okay, that's one way to read this. Does it protest too much? Is Moses overstating the case? Who knows? We'll leave some of that for further speculation. But I on the way out, just ask you to consider the ways in which your perception is distorted in the favors that you seek from other people, and maybe the way you seek favors from others by manipulating them and distorting the truth that we can all live in together. Once I distort my corner of that truth, then your corner gets distorted as well, because we're in relationship to one another. Okay. All right, that's it. I will just say finally that we have a program at 6 o'clock tonight. We've been looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion as they play out here in our community. And tonight we're looking at these questions as they emerge in our Jews of color community. Really encourage you to come to that, 6 p.m. And otherwise, I will see you back here next week. It's so good to be back with you. I missed you. Bye. Love y'all.